All right, everybody, this is Draft Dad here, and I wanted to go over really quick a fundamentals guide to drafting Magic Arena. And these are going to be for newer players. Maybe you're stuck in bronze or silver or gold and you just want to get better and you don't know how. Well, this guide is going to teach you all the fundamentals on how to be a better Magic drafter. All right, so let's jump in. So the format we're going to be talking about is MTGA Best of One Human Drafts. These are the ranked drafts online. I think the premier drafts are like 10,000 gold or 1,500 gems. So when you drop that kind of money, you want to get it back. It's never any fun to go 0-3 in a draft. This guide's going to help you with that. So there are 8 players. You all sit in a circle, online of course. And you're going to pass packs to the left. You're going to open 3 packs, take a card, pass it to the left for the first pack. Second pack, they go to the right. And then for pack 3, they go back to the left. These are where the concepts of signaling and speculating on colors come in. What do I pass? What do I signal? What colors are open? Right? And we'll get into that later. Then the basic concepts of deck building, which we'll dive into. You're going to be able to build a 40-card deck. One of the most common things I see from players who are newer, or they want to jam all the good cards into their deck and they have way more than 40. It's almost never a good idea to go 41 or 42 cards in a draft deck. You always want to trim them down so you have the most streamlined, effective deck possible. Another issue I see with some newer players, you have either too many lands or not enough. Generally, you're going to want 17 lands and 23 spells. Some cases you'll want 16, some cases you'll want 18, but it's usually a safe bet to go with 17 lands. And then the third mistake I see a lot of new players make is they try to play more than 2 colors. So unless you have a lot of fixing, it becomes very difficult to play more than 2 colors. Even splashing is usually not something I would recommend for a new player, but we can get into that a little bit later. So to recap, 40-card deck, 17 lands, and you're going to want to be in 2 colors that hopefully synergize well together. All right, so in deck building, you're going to have some different concepts, right? Creatures, removal, combat tricks, and not every deck is going to have all of these. You're going to have a mana curve, fixing for your colors, and then potentially splashing. So let's get into a deep dive into what these deck building concepts are. The first one, most importantly, is going to be your creatures. A lot of new players don't know how many creatures a deck generally wants. It's usually between 12 and 16. Some decks will play up to 19. Some decks, depending on the build or the synergy, might play as low as 8 or 9. But usually you're going to want between 12 and 16 creatures, and you want them to fit a mana curve, right? You don't want all of your creatures to be 6 drops, because by turn 6 you'll probably be dead and your opponent's just going to beat you down. You don't want them all to be 1 or 2 drops, because you're not going to have enough power for the late game. That's where mana curve comes in. And then you also want utility in your creatures. Either they ramp you mana or draw you cards or have an effect on the battlefield so they can interact. You're going to want to look for those types of creatures as well. So I have a few examples. First one, in M21, Llanowar Visionary. I love this card. It's a 3-drop. So it's a cheaper creature, fits right in your curve. It draws you a card, so it replaces itself. It ramps you mana, and it's a 2/2 body, which isn't a problem in draft and limited formats, right? Great first pickable card right there. Slides right into any green deck. Second one, you could call this a bomb rare, which we'll talk about. Basri's Lieutenant. This is a 4-drop, so it's a little bit more expensive. But it's a 3/4 body, so it's big. It can give itself a counter, and it can replace itself if it dies and has a counter on it. You generate a 2/2 white night creature token with vigilance. You can also pump up your other creatures, give them the +1/+1 counter, and when they die, they replace themselves. So it has a lot of utility there. And then I'll talk about something on the other end of the curve, right? This is a 7-drop, so you usually don't want more than 2 or 3 of these in any deck. Of 6 or 7 drops. But this one has some utility where if you draw it early and you don't have the mana to play it, but you're under pressure from your opponent, you can tap 2 and discard it, draw yourself a card that'll hopefully get you out of a bad situation. If you draw it late game, you can pay the 7, and now you're beaten down with a 7/7 that affects the board, and your opponent has to deal with it or they're going to die. So this is kind of an example of the spread of creatures that you're going to want in your deck. Next, let's talk about removal. This is another mistake I see some players make, is where they'll grab all the removal they can and then their deck doesn't really do anything. It's usually appropriate to have between 2 and 6 removal spells in a deck. You don't want less than 2, and if you have 8 or 9, you're probably you're not dealing any damage to your opponent. And if they have a different way to kill you other than creatures, what are you going to do? All right, so there's 3 main types of removals: damage base, conditional removal, and then hard removal. So we'll go over those really quick. So a good one from M21 is Shock. It's 1 mana, super cheap, instant speed, deals 2 damage to any target. The issue with damage-based removal is if my opponent makes their creature +1/+1 or +4/+4 with a Titanic Growth, all of a sudden my Shock doesn't kill the creature, and then I wasted a card. The other thing is my opponent's creatures can easily have 3 toughness on their own, and then Shock just sits in my hand. So it is cheap, so it can kill a lot of cheaper creatures, but it is something to watch out for, where it can only deal 2 damage. Next is conditional removal. This is also cheap, but it only destroys tapped creatures. It doesn't care about toughness, so it can still kill a very big creature. But when we talked about Basri's Lieutenant, it has Vigilance, so it doesn't tap to attack. So if it doesn't tap to attack, I can't remove it with this spell. Or if my opponent knows I have this card, or if they're on defense and their creatures aren't tapping, then this card becomes a dead card. But it is cheap and it kills big creatures. It's only in certain situations. The last one is hard removal. So black gets a lot of these. And this just says destroy target creature or planeswalker. It's also at instant speed, but it's 5 mana. So this is a big mana investment, and if you cast this on your opponent's 2-drop or 3-drop, it's not very efficient. You're spending 5 mana to stop your opponent's 2-mana spell. And so that's how all of these are balanced. Within each color that has a lot of removal, you'll usually see a spread. So in red, you have Shock that deals 2 damage, Scorching Dragonfire for 2 mana that deals 3 damage. Then you have Turn to Slag at 5 mana that deals 5 damage, right? So you'll want a good spread of removal, efficient removal that kills the creature you want to kill at the time you want to kill it. All right, next one is combat tricks. Most decks usually only want between 1 and 3 of these, if they want any at all. So there's different things that they can be used for. In aggro decks, you'll tend to want a few more combat tricks. In control decks or decks that don't have a lot of creatures, maybe you don't want as many. So the first one we'll talk about is your blow up potential, right? So let's say my opponent has a 3/3, I have a 1/1, they're going to attack with their 3/3. If I have Angelic Ascension, what I can do is when they tap to attack, this is an instant spell, I turn my 1/1 into a 4/4 angel with flying, I block, kill their 3/3, and next turn I'm attacking for 4. That's a blow up. That's a huge swing in board state and game balance that can be hard to recover from, right? A 4/4 angel with flying is hard to deal with. Another situation that combat tricks can come and help are for racing situations. So if my opponent and I are both low on life, he's winning a race, I can cast Alchemist's Gift, give my creature +1/+1 in lifelink, and all of a sudden I gain 4 life, and now I'm winning the race. Or if my opponent has a huge creature that they're beating me down with, my creatures are all 1/1s and 2/2s, I can give one of them Death Touch and kill my opponent's creature, and then hopefully equalize the board state or stabilize. The last one is saving bombs, right? So if I have my Basri's Lieutenant, it has 4 toughness, or it has 5 toughness because it gave itself the +1/+1 counter. My opponent tries to turn to slag it. I cast Titanic Growth. The turn to slag does nothing, and I save my bomb rare. So those are a few different situations in which you can affect the board with a combat trick. Also think about this one. If I have Titanic Growth, I attack my 4/4 into 2 3/3s. My opponent blocks with both. I cast Titanic Growth. I kill both his cards. That's called a 2-for-1. So those are a few situations where combat tricks can be useful, but I wouldn't overload my deck with those. I see a lot of new players make that mistake as well. All right, so next steps. So you have your draft done. What you want to be thinking about is your mana curve. So a 5-drop or a 7-drop that we talked about is going to be a lot more powerful than a 2-drop, but you're going to need more 2-drops than 7-drops, right? Just to have that mana curve efficient, so you're always playing spells on every turn that you can. The second one is fixing. Even if I'm just 2 colors, I'm still going to want fixing. So if I'm in a white-blue deck, I'm going to want to pick up a Tranquil Cove if I see it in a pack where there's not other cards that I really want. But let's say I'm in a white-green deck, and I don't have any removal. I might pick up a Tranquil Cove in case I get some blue removal later. So I pick up a couple Tranquil Coves, a couple Fixers. I still don't have any removal, but in pack 3, pick 1, I see a Capture Sphere. I know I need it for my deck, and all of a sudden I can splash this card because I grabbed that Tranquil Cove, and I know my mana is good in my white-green deck, and I can splash this pretty much for free and get that blue removal spell that increases the power level of an otherwise medium deck. That's when you're going to want to try to splash. Usually it's 1 pip or 1 mana color and then colorless that you're going to want to splash. You don't want, if this was 2 blue and 2 colorless, I wouldn't want to put that or splash that into my white-green deck. But if it's just 1 pip of blue mana, you could be good to go if you have enough fixing. All right, so I want to take you through some draft choices here. So I have a couple sample packs here, and we'll talk through the choices, what passing and signaling are, and then figure out what the best card to take would be. So if I open up my first pack, this is pack 1, pick 1, the first thing I'm going to do is look for a bomb rare. I don't have one in this pack. Chromatic Orrery, it's a mythic, but it doesn't really work very well in limited. So the next thing I'm going to look for are very efficient creatures, signpost uncommons, and removal spells. Here, there's not any very efficient creatures, but I do have a couple removal spells, right? I have Shock and I have Grasp of Darkness. Shock, we've talked about, 2 damage to any target, very cheap, very efficient. Grasp of Darkness, 2 black mana, so it's more of a color commitment, but it has a bigger effect on the board. It shrinks a creature if it doesn't kill it, so if my opponent has a 6/6, I can shrink it to a 2/2 and kill it at instant speed, block it with my 3/3, and away I go. That's a huge blowout, right? Shock couldn't do that. So now that I've decided it's going to be one of those 2 cards, I'm going to look at the other cards in the pack, right? I see one other good red card. I see a decent gold card here, and I'm going to be passing this pack to the left. So if I were to take the Shock, the next player would probably take a Grasp of Darkness, so that would put them into black, or they'd want to be in black. And then the person after that would probably take the Chandra's Pyreling, putting them into red, which I've already drafted. So in pack 2, when they're passed into me, I might not see as many red cards. So in this pack, I would take that Grasp of Darkness. It's a more powerful card, and the next 2 best cards are red, so I can put the people to my left into red and hopefully be rewarded in pack 2, because they're going to be fighting over the red cards, and I'll take whatever else is left over, and I should get better cards, hopefully in black, but in another color that I pick. So I take the Grasp of Darkness, and the next pack, this is what I see. So this is a pretty powerful pack. The first thing I'm going to do is look for which card was taken. Every pack gets 1 rare, 3 uncommons, and then the rest are going to be commons. You'll have 10, and then you'll have a land in there. So I'm seeing that the rare was taken. It could have been a bomb rare, so that's not going to give me any information on what colors are being passed to me, because you generally just want to take the strongest card in the pack. Pack 1, pick 1. And then I'm going to look for signpost uncommons again, and efficient creatures and good removal. So I'm seeing very good removal, Scorching Dragonfire. I'm seeing an efficient creature in Chandra's Magma, both red, which I just passed. I'm also seeing a very efficient creature in Silver Smoke Ghoul. That has a lot of synergy with other decks in the format. So the choice here, I am going to narrow down between Silver Smoke Ghoul, the black card, I already picked a Grasp of Darkness, and Scorching Dragonfire. I wouldn't fault anyone for picking the Scorching Dragonfire here, or the Ghoul. I would probably speculate and pick up the Scorching Dragonfire because I don't have any information on what's being passed to me. But then I'm going to put the person to my left into black which I don't want to do at this point. So it's a really tough pick here. I wouldn't fault anyone for picking up the Ghoul or the Scorching Dragonfire to try to snap up all those black cards and being rewarded in pack 2. So that's a tough pick. All right. Lastly, I want to show you what a decent draft deck might look like. All right, so first thing you're gonna notice is the curve here. I got a lot of 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops, not as many 5+ drops, but I do have some powerful cards. I have my Bomb Rare that I pack 1, pick 1, and then I tried to get more blue cards, but I saw white was open, so I was able to snap up a bunch of white cards. I have some conditional removal here. Enthralling Hold gives me control of a creature as long as it's tapped. I have Legion's Judgment up at the top there for 3 mana that kills a creature power 4 or greater. And then I also have Basri's Lieutenant, which is another very efficient bomb creature. The game plan for this deck is to draw a bunch of cards, be a tempo deck, and have creatures with evasion. So you'll see I have 2 Gale Swoopers which fly, 2 Sky Scanners. The Basri's Lieutenant adds counters onto creatures. Basri's Solidarity gives a +1/+1 counter to each creature. And then I also have a Feat of Resistance as a combat trick to help me win in combat. And then hopefully that gets me enough ahead on board where I can drop my Teferi Planeswalker, win the game that way, or an Enthralling Hold on their bomb creature, and then I can kill them with their own creature. So this goes over a few of the different types of decks that you might want to construct if you're looking for those concepts and those fundamentals while you're picking cards. Hopefully you don't get any more 0-3s and you start winning these and rising up the ranking. All right, so my name was Draft Dad. If you like this video, give a like and subscribe, and I'll make a ton more M21 content going forward. Thank you so much.